when we actually go ahead and negotiate our salary in an interview, if we think that we can earn 5 lakh a month, but the interviewer comes back and says that, okay, I'm going to give you like a lakh and a half, suddenly the anchor changes, right? Now you're sort of moving around that anchor only. Maybe you'll come to 2.5 lakhs, but you'll not really shoot up to 5 lakhs. I have really concluded that if you don't have a logical mind, you cannot go one step ahead and sort of create things in a creative manner, sort of build things in a creative manner. Our mind bases the information or takes decision or moves ahead or makes judgment and choices basis just the last information that we got in our life. There is no confusion about the fact that the heart pumps blood, right? But when it comes to mind, there is no universality that we really know. There is nothing that yes, this is the structure of the mind. This is how the mind acquires knowledge. We have no clue.
Our mind is one of the most fascinating organs in our body. Every single minute, we are thinking so many thoughts. We are consciously or subconsciously making a lot of decisions. Our mind helps us become creative, be logical, and so on and so forth. So, in this episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast, we try to uncover our mind, how you can be really more creative, and most importantly, I'm sure you must have heard that we are the result of the decisions that you have taken in the past. But what are the things that drive our decisions? What are the biases that we have? Maybe there are some decisions that you are making automatically without thinking about them, and you don't even realize that you have some biases for certain kind of decision that you make. And for us to help us understand this, I have invited Ashish Chawla. Ashish is a CA who used to be Chief Financial Officer of one of the billion-dollar companies out there, Go Ibibo, and now who is a creative entrepreneur, actor, writer, and guitarist. Ashish is one of those people who have gone really deep to understand the mind. And in this episode, he talks about how you can really be creative, and he decodes what are emotions, what does even thinking means, how can you think better thoughts. This episode is full of information, and you will realize there is so much depth and layers to every single thing that we discuss in this conversation. I'm sure you are going to find a lot of intense value. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast. I'm excited to be joined by Ashish Chawla. Ashish, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
I was looking at your work and I realized that the depth that you're in the space of understanding mind and understanding how we take decisions was really fascinating. And on your website, you have this test called thinking test, right? So I took that test, and here's the result, and I want to start from there, right? It says your overall thinking score is 55%. Is that bad?
No, that's on an average, it's like pretty decent. Like, I generally get like a score of around 25 to 30%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So a little above average.
It
says your thinking has been assessed on 3 parameters: clarity, creativity, and confidence. And it rates clarity 35%, creativity 50%, and confidence 80%.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Can you explain what this test is?
Sure.
And what are each of these parameters are, and how did you sort of come up with this?
No, so it's a very simple test, basically. It's basically designed by me, where it has just 16 questions. It's a 5-minute test, and with very, very interesting take on every question. And it's like a multiple choice question where you sort of choose. The questions are so interesting that you would want to sort of go ahead and take this test. So you choose a choice, like you select a choice, and then you move forward and you complete the 16 test, and you get an email. So this test basically is, as you rightly mentioned, is covering 3 parameters. First is clarity, the other is creativity, and the next is confidence. So just to like very, on a broad way, just to like sort of explain what these 3 parameters really mean. Clarity really means that, are you able to sort of see things as is? Are you able to sort of see the similarities between things and differentiate it from the rest, from the nearest relatives of those particular things? And can you sort of clearly understand what exactly the concept is about? So that's what clarity of thinking is. That can you really like critically think what exactly the question is and what is the answer for that question, and do you have like a cause and effect, a logic for whatever you sort of bringing out. Creativity is a very interesting topic, and people really get confused by this whole concept of creativity. Very simply put, creativity, according to me, actually is, and I've done like extensive research on creativity, and in fact, my whole career is now moved from logical, analytical thinking to actually creative thinking. Creativity is that can you actually look at two different situations, and then can you find which are not connected to each other, and can you actually find a connection between the two? Say I run just to like hypothetical, like an example that is sort of coming to my mind. I run a creative agency, and we were asked to sort of, for one of these top brands, we were doing a campaign for printers, and we were supposed to come up with a creative idea. And what they were really, the client was facing was they were facing some issues as far as the printing, the jam of printing papers is concerned. And that was this new product that they were launching was solving. That was the problem that they were solving. So they wanted to sort of create something which was interesting, had a hook, was engaging, and eventually sort of spoke the like people could, like, the idea was that people should understand it, relate to it, and yet also get the idea that it's a functional thing that they're sort of trying to solve. So we thought that, okay, what basically jam can be sort of related to? So a paper jam, actually we sort of related it to a traffic jam, and figured out, like, can there be some similarities between a traffic jam and how you really feel, and a paper jam and how you really feel, and can those be combined? So just to explain broadly, creativity as per me is that you have two different things which are not related to each other, but can you think out of the box, and can you sort of bring
Connect
those
those.
connections, connect those connections? So it's all about making connections. So
Mm.
that's what really creativity is.
No, I totally agree to that
Yeah,
because,
you do.
yeah, absolutely. Because, like again, like you said, right? We run a creative company as well, and every single time we need to think of an idea. And my approach is like, okay, is it the most obvious? Like, oftentimes I feel that the first idea that comes in our head is the most obvious ones,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And is it the obvious idea, or what is not so obvious idea that we can go into? And for you to come up with that not so obvious idea, you need to and also the one of the things that I've learned is, for you to connect those dots, you should have collected enough dots first,
That's correct. That's
right?
correct.
Which means you
Yeah,
exposed yourself to so many ideas.
yeah,
Now then you can connect to
yeah.
those dots.
Yeah, so and that's a brilliant point, Bijay, that you brought up. But one is actually that you are connecting. You've experienced enough in life, and you're connecting a lot of dots subconsciously. Maybe because you've like sort of thought through and figured out, okay, that there is this commonality, similarities between various things, and your mind is now mature enough to integrate a lot of things together. And the other approach is actually to really understand how the mind functions, understand the universal identity of the mind, and figure out that how mind is actually really making concepts, and then can you deliberately do it. So let me give you an example. Uh, since you brought this topic up, I think it's very close to my heart. So and I'm talking about like stereotypical thinking, and that you come up with the obvious answer. There was this spectacle company, who was making spectacles, and they wanted to increase the sale of their company, of their spare. They wanted to sort of grow their sales. So they thought that they went with an assumption that customer is the king. Of course, you take the spectacles, you take to the customer, do the survey, you understand where the problem is, really understand what the pain points are, and then you come back and you implement those, and hopefully the sales will increase. So that's exactly what they did. They conducted like a countrywide survey, and they came up with like 10,000 answers. And the answers that they came up was that maybe the arms of the spectacles should be like larger, or maybe the spectacles should come in different colors, or the spectacles should have a different nose pad, and so on and so forth. Obvious answers, but like very good suggestions, I would say. But imagine if they would have, all those people would have stuck to this only. Their idea was to grow the sales. So if they would have stayed in this position only, then nobody would have come up with a thought called a contact lens.
Yeah.
Like nobody would have really thought that, okay, there is a possibility to actually completely disrupt the market, eradicate, or like some completely take away the spectacle thing and come up with a plastic thing and
Yeah.
actually put it in your eye, and that looks good. Even you can flaunt your looks, you can sort of change your personality, and at the
Yeah.
same time it is disruptive.
Mm.
Now imagine if someone would have just stayed at that stage
Yeah.
of thinking, then no one would have come up with something like a laser surgery.
True.
Like you can actually go and cut the cornea of the eye, and you can actually remove the contact lens itself, and the whole thing of spectacles of contact lens just completely goes away. That's disruptive thinking, and I would say that is what creativity is. Can you actually really first of all understand what the box is? Then can you logically connect it with all the other things that are there out there, and can you then make like a educated sort of move towards disruption and creativity? So coming back to
Yeah, that's
the
the second
test,
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what really creativity is. And of course you have to understand how the mind functions to really deliberately move towards the whole creativity aspect. And the third actually is confidence. And confidence really simply means it's not like how well you can speak or how well you can like present yourself. It's really that can you be independent in your thinking? Can you rely on your own mind to make your own decisions? you know so that's what really confidence is. When this test is the test is testing that ability of yours. So if you've scored 80, if I'm not mistaken, 80%, that's like a huge score. So I think you do not, and this is like a testimony and an example of what basically you're doing. This is not like a standard path that people would take, right? Doing a podcast, creating like this company that you're doing, and some amazing work that you do with the brands. That's like a very, very different path. Maybe it's now becoming common, but still, I would say it's still early stages. But you are not following the herd. You are actually understanding what your needs are, what your values are, what your goals are. You understand maybe subconsciously what makes you happy. And eventually, you've sort of relied on your independent mind and taken a decision. And that's why, and it reflects on your score as well. So kudos to you, and I'm glad that.
Yeah, but the clarity is somewhere around 35%. But do you say that, like, having this awareness of where I stand in terms of these three different parameters, this is where I stand when it comes to clarity, this is where I stand when it comes to creativity and confidence, like, you play with your strength, or you also work on some of the areas that where.
So I would say that without clarity, the journey towards your goal just becomes longer. So if you have clarity, and clarity really, when I say clarity, I simply mean if you understand how the mind really functions, how you really should be making decisions. Do you have even a methodology to really analyze things? If you have that, in your arsenal,
Now I'm
then the
realizing
whole
I don't.
then the whole journey would be like, if you've taken
Yeah.
maybe like say so many years,
Yeah.
maybe the journey would be like a lot lesser.
Mm.
you know so that's the importance of clarity, I would
Mm.
say.
Mm.
And creativity is just like a byproduct of clarity.
Got it.
People with due respect to Mr. De Bono, Edward De Bono, who's like sort of come up with this term called lateral thinking.
Mm.
And I've gone and read those books and all. And it really talks about, leave your logical thinking, your critical thinking hat, just like go wild and start like
Mm.
thinking through. But all the work that I've done and all the research that I've done in this field, I have really concluded that if you don't have a logical mind, you cannot go one step ahead and sort of create things,
Mm.
in a creative manner, sort of build things in a creative manner. So I would say clarity actually is the base. Then creativity follows, and then confidence would be like, you'll be like even more confident to take the decisions, because then you will have a
Have a
proper
clarity, and
set
yeah.
methodology of why you've
Mm.
taken this decision.
Mm.
So I would say clarity is one of the biggest pillars or the foundations.
How does one bring that clarity?
That's a very interesting question, and that's where the whole research and the whole journey really lies. And I think it really comes from, first of all, understanding. Again, I for the sake of repeating, understanding how the mind really functions and how the mind really acquires knowledge. For example, I show you a picture of a chair, and I will say what this is. You will go ahead and say that this is a chair. I will show a picture of another chair with a different shape, different size, different this thing color, and I'll show it to you. I will say what this is. You will come up and say that this is a chair, and I will show you 100 such pictures, and you will say that yes, this is a chair, right? But did you see all these chairs ever in your life physically? You didn't. Did our parents ever tell us that, okay, all the chairs that are there in this world are chairs? No. So there is something that has happened in our mind, that our mind has done, and seen maybe three, four chairs when we were growing up, and seen something, the mind did, like maybe looked at some similarities and generalized that all these actually are chairs. So what exactly happened in the mind. That is really about, once you become obsessed about thinking, then we'll get really the answers of what exactly happened. And this is a very simple answer to really tell you, like, this is a very simple way of explaining that we have no clue how we say that every chair that we see is a chair, and we don't confuse it with a table or a bed or a computer or this mic. But there is something definitely that subconsciously the mind has done, which we are not aware of. And taking this simple example to an emotion, you go ahead and say that, okay, this is a friend, these are the movies that I like, this is hate, this is anxiousness,
Yeah.
this is stress. What exactly is happening in the mind? How did you really come to conclusion that this is what it is? Did we have a methodology to first of all understand what the mind did? Did we step back, zoom out, and really reflect on what exactly is happening within the mind, which is sort of making these concepts, and how the mind is really acquiring knowledge? That is the whole effort that needs to actually go in to really get clarity. uh, you know it is why this becomes really difficult is that our mind actually is the doctor and the patient as well. To make you understand this, like give you an example. So suppose if you're working on a Word document, and if you're typing something, and suddenly the Word document starts typing something that you're not typing and starts throwing errors,
Yeah.
you'll immediately get to know that, oh, there's an error, right? Now imagine if this whole exercise actually had to be done by the software itself, which is actually processing. So the software is processing, typing also, and also has to now zoom out and detect that there's an error.
Yeah.
That is tough, right? That requires a lot of zooming out and really becoming more aware of what it is. And that's exactly what happens with the mind. And unfortunately, we are never taught about this. Nobody in our schools, in our even, with all the effort that our parents have also sort of put in, nobody has really spoken about or in detail about the identity of the mind. And what I really mean by this is that, when I say that heart has an identity, say, for example, your heart pumps blood at a particular rate, my heart pumps blood at a different rate. But there is no confusion about the fact that the heart pumps blood,
Yeah.
right? But when it comes to mind, there is no universality that we really know. There is nothing that yes, this is the structure of the mind. This is how the mind acquires knowledge. We have no clue. We just think that, okay, I am a positive person, I am a negative person, I have this attitude. So we talk in personalities.
Yeah.
But if we really go back and see that why this personality got formed, why did our thinking structure got formed, and why do we think the way we think, and there is a reason why everyone is thinking differently, because the software has functioned and really acquired some knowledge differently. But the way the software acquires knowledge is universal for all. Once we understand that at that deepest level, that's when we start sort of untying the knots. That's when we start getting towards clarity, and that's when we lay the foundation correct. So
Where does one begin?
do my course. No, but like, on a serious note, it's about really understanding, uh, to really go to the level that is very deep,
Mm-hmm.
in the zone. You have to first start with where you are,
Mm.
really, and how you're processing information. Let me make it real for you.
Yeah.
I can tell you that the way you draw a pig
Mm-hmm.
actually depicts a lot about the way you think. And I can
Really?
tell you
Mm-hmm.
that how the way you would draw a pig, this is exactly how you think. Do you want to give it a shot? Okay. You don't have to draw
Yeah.
it. You have to
Yeah.
just imagine drawing a
Yeah.
pig. So what you need to do is just imagine that
Yeah. I
there's
think
a
I might be a little biased because I've watched the video of yours.
or you have,
In that
but
sense. So
but then
yeah.
play along maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe people who are listening to this podcast have not done this. So
Yeah.
so just play along with all this with this exercise. So just imagine that on a piece of paper, you have to draw a pig.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and just imagine drawing a pig in your mind. All right, you've drawn a pig. Now the way you draw a pig actually tells a lot about your mind. So if how big is your pig? If the pig that you've drawn is quite big on that piece of paper, you really think that you're a very important person. Your opinions really matter. That what you really think and how you really think matters, and you place high. You have a very high value of your own self. But if the pig that you've drawn is small, then you think the opposite. You think that, you may not be that creative, you may not be that valuable, you may not be, your opinion doesn't matter so much. Which side does the pig face? If the pig faces towards the left, then you're a left brain kind of a person. You're analytical, you're logical, you think about data, you analyze things in a very structured way. But if it is, it faces to the right, then you are more creative. You like music, you like poetry, you think in a very unstructured way. How many legs does your pig have? So if your pig has like 4 legs, then you are very balanced kind of a person.
Mhm.
If your pig has 2 legs, then there's scope of improvement. If there are no legs at all, then please, you must get balance in your life. Now, how big are your ears?
Mm.
If ears that you've drawn are very big, then you're a very big good listener. If the ears that you've drawn are small, then you're not that good a listener.
What is driving this behavior in?
I'm
Yeah.
coming at that. I'm
Yeah.
coming at that. How big is the tail? There's a research done about the tail as well. That if the tail is long, then your sex life is great. If the tail is small, then the sex life is not that great. All right, maybe we'll have to sort of verify that research. But this is what this once someone draws a pig, you can really come up with a lot of understanding of how
Hmm.
the mind really functions.
Hmm.
Now, what I want you to do is imagine on another piece of paper drawing a mouse.
Hmm.
Just draw a mouse for me.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
And my question to you is: does your mouse, by any chance, look like a computer mouse?
No, no, it doesn't.
So I have conducted this exercise like a million times, and 99.99% of the times, people would draw a mouse that is an animal version.
Hmm.
And isn't it strange? Like we look at the mouse pretty much every day.
Yeah.
It's simpler to draw,
Hmm.
but still we will go ahead and draw the mouse, which is more difficult. We don't look at it, and it
Hmm.
is, it is like really tough to draw. Why does the mind really work like this? And it is so easy for me to sort of predict that you will go ahead and draw this, mainly because our mind actually bases information, and this is one of the ways we take decisions. Our mind bases the information, or takes decision, or moves ahead, or makes judgment and choices basis just the last information that we got in our life. So imagine if I would have, first of all that I told about the pig was just made up by me.
Mhm.
It's not true.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was just framing your
Hmm.
mind
Hmm.
to sort of get you to draw this and not that. And that's what really the advertisers and those people who can manipulate with the mind do with our mind. And we have to understand, those people who are not even trying to manipulate our mind, just like throwing information at us, our mind anchors the information there. So we start judging our last relationship. Basis the last relationship, we will judge our current relationship.
Hmm.
Basis the ideal relationship that we have, we'll sort of judge our current relationship. So there's an anchor that is being placed when we actually go ahead and negotiate our salary in an
Hmm.
interview. If we think that we can earn 5 lakh a month, but the interviewer comes back and says that, okay, I'm going to give you like a lakh and a half. Suddenly the anchor changes, right?
Hmm.
Now you're sort of moving around that anchor only. Maybe you'll come to 2.5 lakhs,
Hmm.
but you'll not really shoot up to 5
Hmm.
lakhs. This is exactly what happens when it comes to bargaining with a cop who's caught you jumping a red light.
Yeah.
He'll say that, oh, the challan is for 2,000 rupees.
Hmm.
Are you going to like come back and say that, okay, no, I have just like 20 rupees in my pocket? No, you're going to sort of move around 500, 1,000 mark. So what I'm trying to say is that this is one of the ways that our mind is getting influenced, and we are not even aware of that. And we are making judgments without really knowing what is the reason, what is the base of why we are making these judgments. I can give you another example. If
Oh,
you
this is really interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So just to sort of, it's very important to, I can really talk about the technical part of the mind, but there is no point of doing that, because then, it would not be your own experience. Like maybe, people who have played along with this, listening to the podcast, if they would have played along with this thing, they would have themselves experienced that, yes, their mind, they got influence in drawing the animal version. Now, another example, another case study, in fact, that I wanted to share was that there's this concept of dragon ear in the Chinese tradition. So it comes after every 12 years as per Chinese calendar. And the belief is that, that those people who are born in the dragon year are very, very intelligent. then they do well in their life. So the dragon year, which is coming in 2024, by the way. So if you're planning a planning a child, this is
Yeah.
the right time to
No,
sort
I
of
meant
do
to
it.
get married.
Yeah. So so what happens in China is that people start planning their family to sort of see that that their child is born in the year of the dragon. So there's this big belief that the person who's born in the year of the dragon will actually go ahead and do really well in life. So, there were two economists in Louisiana who really wanted to test this thing. So they hypothesized, and they said that, okay, so if 500,000 extra children are basically born in the year of the dragon,
Dragon, yeah.
then ideally this means that in the classrooms, because the batch keeps moving and there's like
Yeah.
the huge population that has been born in a particular
Yeah.
year, the classrooms will be overcrowded, which will in the schools, which will mean that the teachers will actually be able to pay less attention to students. So there would be not enough attention per student, which a teacher will give. So ideally, the performance of these dragon kids should actually fall down, because there's just like so much competition and so much less teacher attention. And so they created this hypothesis, and this actually logically makes a lot of sense. And they went ahead and tested the data. So they adjusted all the variables of the data, and sort of compared oranges versus oranges, and went ahead and said that wanted to see whether this hypothesis is correct or not. To their surprise, dragon kids outperformed the other kids by 20% in
Oh,
schools.
wow.
And this was exactly the same trend that went ahead in colleges as well. So what the reality is that dragon kids are actually doing better. So they wanted to really figure out what is the reason, because there was no science to it.
Yeah.
And eventually, when they entered the psychology of how the human mind really functions, they figured out that the actual reason of why the dragon kids outperform other kids is because of the belief of their parents. Their parents really believe that my child who's born in a dragon year is eventually at least going to get a school education, at least going to get a college degree. And that's the belief that is actually gotten passed on to the child, and it's worked for the child. So the software is set in a way, and as I said, the way you acquire the knowledge of a chair and you generalize things, that's exactly the way you acquire the knowledge of your own personality, of your own character, of your own soul and your own self. And that's how the self and subconscious mind really gets built. And we'll come to that also. So they started believing that they're going to do well, and eventually they did well. So it's all about how the the subconscious mind is really built, you know and how it is like making you take decisions in your life. And if you get the arsenal,
Yeah.
if you get the equipment really to understand how beliefs function, how we acquire beliefs, that's the time when you will start uncovering all the details and really reach to the bottom. And then there are tools and techniques, sort of mental models, to sort of move towards a right way of actually thinking. And so yeah, so it's all about really understanding, again, back to the same thing, understanding how the mind really functions. And just since we are talking about this whole concept of beliefs, I've given you an example of how the beliefs, really good, beliefs and expectations of others can enhance your performance. There are a lot of beliefs. In fact, most of the beliefs that we hold are actually, sort of bringing us down. So, what exactly is beliefs? Like if I were to like really break down the whole concept, belief is nothing but our ideas or the convictions that we hold, or the thinking methodology, or the point of view that we hold, which we consider to be true, irrespective of the fact whether those convictions, those ideas have evidence, they are true in reality or not. Whether we have evidence of it or not, we think that this is true, and that's the belief that really gets formed. For example, if you say that there is a belief that the earth is round, and there's also a belief that fairies exist. So depending on how your belief structure is really made, and how your entire value structure, belief structure is sort of compiled of, that is what is sort of making you take the decisions in your life. So it's about reaching to the core and to the fundamentals. And as I was mentioning, there are really two kinds of beliefs, like having functional beliefs
Mm-hmm.
or having dysfunctional beliefs.
What are those?
And functional beliefs are like the earth is round,
Okay.
that help you sort of move towards this thing. All the dysfunctional belief, very very, a common example, if I were to really talk about, is that my degree that I hold actually decides the career that I'm going to take through.
Mhm.
Or the job, if I'm successful in my job, that is a belief that it will lead to happiness. So
Mm.
these are a lot of dysfunctional beliefs that we are actually holding, and there are a million
Of course,
other
yeah.
beliefs, which are actually sort of making us take decisions. But the ultimate barometer, ultimate test is that, are you, is the resultant emotion that is actually getting produced, is it a positive emotion or a negative emotion? So once we understand how the mind really, makes emotions also, then we are again giving ourselves the arsenal to sort of dig deeper into the whole, the game of mind, or the whole built of mind. So yeah, and that was one of the reasons, how I sort of moved from a very very analytical career. Not that I was not having fun, and
Yeah.
what I was doing in my previous career
Yeah.
was something that was right for me, because my whole character, my whole soul, my whole self was built around that.
Yeah.
And if I would have changed then,
You studied CA and then
yeah, so
yeah,
just
you're
to
doing
like,
finance.
yeah, just to give you a background, like I moved, my career has sort of spanned across a few industries. So I started working with companies like KPMG and GE.
Mm.
I did a lot of process consulting, project management, advisory audit role. And then I moved into the e-commerce space. And we were five of us who started this, one of India's first e-commerce companies.
Mm.
And we grew the company from 5 to 1,500. I was heading finance there.
Mm.
And I was quite instrumental in sort of raising $65 million for the company. And then I moved on and became the CFO of GoIBPO. That was like, a $1 billion online aggregator,
Mm.
which everyone knows. And this happened over a span of like 15 years of my career, first career. And I was having fun,
Yeah.
honestly. It was not that I was not enjoying, but it was around this time that I really started understanding what the mind, how the mind really functions.
Mm.
I started doing so much research on psychology, started
Mm.
getting deeper into philosophy,
Mm.
started understanding the science of happiness,
Mm.
started understanding who I am and what are my value structures and so on and so
Mm.
forth. And eventually, sort of reached a situation where I understood that, okay,
Mm.
how I would want to design my life eventually, and I got to know that my degree is not really the end result, is not deciding my career completely. I can design my life. There is a belief that I'm holding because of a lot of anchors that have been placed by maybe my sibling who's become a doctor, my parents who set these expectations, and they were right for me. Their intention was completely right and it worked for me. And I'm so glad that I went through all that journey. And now I have the power to sort of see things, be very clear, then go ahead and become creative, and then become very independent in my decision making, and eventually take a course that makes both a passion sense and a business sense. So that's how I sort of moved into the whole content space and started this creative content studio. And it's been 8 years, and things have gone going on
I think
quite
that's
well.
a really, interesting journey from being in a completely logical numbers and facts to getting into the creative, which requires a different skill set in the sense that you are using different part of the brain, right? And you are kind of getting the knowledge and the kind of experience from the logical, and then now in the creative, right? So is it possible that for people to develop both of the left and right kind of brains? Like oftentimes people say that, hey, you are left dominated or you are right, and we, like you said, right, we categorize people. Hey, you are logical, hey, you are creative, and you stay logical, you stay creative. But is that uh,
Yeah, so it's very important to understand and do the research and understand what is logic, what is critical thinking, what is creative thinking, and also I would really insist people to really bust this myth of a left brain and a right brain. There has been extensive research that has been done, which sort of says that there is no left brain and a right brain. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, creativity cannot happen without logic. You know, the more logical you are, and the more clear you are about the concept of creativity, that's when you start becoming more creative. So it's about really understanding, can you actually go ahead, understanding how thinking really works? Can you see things and discover patterns? You know, can you then extract patterns logically and then put them together and generalize things later? Integrate a lot of things together. You know, that really, the base is logical. You know, you can call it like a left brain thinking, you know, and which eventually leads to right brain thinking. So even if, say, I play music, you know, I'm like now almost like a concert level guitar player, you know, and I've been playing music for like you know, when I was 7 years or so. And I started composing when I composed my first song when I was 9, you know, and I've done like thousands of brand jingles and so on and so forth. I realized that, you know, the way I was composing earlier without really strong technical knowledge, I was composing stuff which I was happy about, but still, you know, I was lacking that that extra edge. But now that, you know, I've sort of integrated a lot of stuff in music itself, I've sort of connected a lot of dots. I've gone ahead and studied it formally. I've become a little more logical about my practice sessions, how one song is related to the other. You know, how the other song actually got inspired from the previous song. You know, once I'm starting to seeing these patterns, that's when I think that my creations are becoming even better. You know, to answer your question, it really starts from becoming clear and understanding how thinking works. You know, and I can very quickly give you an example, or maybe sort of lay down the
Yeah.
whole foundation of how thinking really works. You know, uh, there are three levels of consciousness, really. You know, and we have to understand how we are acquiring knowledge. This is like how we are saying that this chair is a chair, and all the other chairs that we now see, which we have not really physically touched upon, are chairs. You know, so that's how did that happen. So, if I were to really break it down, the first level of consciousness is actually starts from our senses. You know, our senses really tell us that there is something that exists out there. It doesn't tell us what that something is. You know, so we'll see this glass and we'll know that, okay, there is this something that exists. A child is seeing this, you know, and he says that, okay, I see a lot of colors, I see a lot of this thing, but I have no clue what these are. But I know that there is something that is out there that exists, which is different from me. You know, then comes the second stage of thinking, is actually the stage of perception. You know, when we start sort of getting into the identity of things. So, you know, I will start figuring out that, okay, this table is a table. I cannot walk through the table. It is not transparent. It has a shape. It has some color. It has some identity. So this is the time when, you know, a child will start, say, differentiating between the skin of her mother and the surface of the table. You know, so we start differentiating things basis identity slowly and steadily. And then comes the third stage, which is actually the concept formation stage. That is when I will club a lot of similar things into one folder, and I will give it a name, say that, and would give it a word, in this case, a chair, you know, and that is knowledge. That is how I have sort of built a brick in my mind and said that now I understand whether it is correct or not, but at least in my mind, I understand that this is a chair, you know. And now imagine if I would have formed a concept which is completely different from yours, but I still call it a chair. I'm seeing the world and seeing reality through that lens. That's the concept that I'm holding in my mind. This is a chair for me. Maybe it is a table that I've just named it as chair, you know. And we will not make, see, you know, you'll find it very, you know, simple, that, oh, how can we call it a chair? But this is exactly how it happens when it comes to higher level concepts, concepts of friendship, concepts of marriage, concepts of choosing a career, concepts of happiness, concepts of love. You know, how are we saying that this is the ideal life, or this is the life for me? How did we really form a concept of friendship? You know,
And
what
is
is
this ever
friendship?
changing?
Of course, this changes once. So again, you know, this changes once we understand and get deeper into the mind. And this is all science. You know, the biggest problem that I really had, you know, I did a lot of because I had a very curious mind. I wanted to really understand, so I went ahead and did a lot of religious studying. You know, then went ahead and did a lot of spiritual, mindfulness studying, but still my answers were not really getting resolved. And once I started, understanding psychology, and then sort of connected all the dots, that's when my doubts or everything started getting connected. So this can definitely change once we get to know exactly how the how the mind functions. And to really explain it to you in a very simplistic way, there are two brain modes, that we can really see at a top level, at a very a high level. Once we go deeper, when we'll understand that everything is connected. But the two brain modes are like, one is the automated brain mode, and the other is a reflective brain mode.
What are
So
these?
what are these? What is an automated brain mode? An automated brain mode is a brain mode which actually thinks very fast. Is very instinctive. It is very emotional. It's really taking decisions immediately. It's the whole subconscious mind that we really talk about, which I don't want to like really get into the technicalities, because that's a huge space of the whole subconscious mind. And again, science, nothing, no spiritual, no religious talk that I'm doing here. So that's the automated brain.
Okay, because you have a lot of information already stored in your subconscious mind, you take
Yeah.
things,
Yeah,
decisions
and I'm
quickly.
going to come to that
Yeah.
also. And the other actually is the reflective mind. The reflective mind is actually slow in thinking. It zooms out and looks at all my values, all the goals, all the reality out there, and then it takes decisions. So it is reflective. It knows how to regulate its emotions and take decisions very, very, after a proper introspection. For example, if you're immediately attracted to a particular person or not attracted to its physical appearance, that's the subconscious mind or the automated brain mode that is taking a decision. But when you will actually go ahead and analyze whether,
Yeah.
why am I not attracted? What is it that I should be really looking at and maybe making a decision, and taking an eventual decision of maybe hiring that person or getting married to that person, then that's the reflective brain mode that is playing, in your mind. There's so many people that we will see, and eventually, like in a jiffy, we actually make our decisions whether the person is good, person is not good, whether I should hire, not hire, and the whole interview process or the whole introspection process is not really introspection really happening, but only our confirmation happening, that we are taking up, pieces of information to just confirm our first impression that we really formed. So it is not reflective thinking. And the whole idea really is to move from an automated mindset to a whole reflective mindset. And why does this happen? First of all, why does the automated mindset, before I move to how we can sort of do this, it's very important to understand why the mind functions the way it functions. The reality is that our mind actually has a limited space. We that's one of the universal natures of the identity of the mind. We cannot store, like, we cannot be always reflective about a lot of information. We can only look at this much information. So to function in this world, what happens is that the mind goes ahead, analyzes new information, and then it goes ahead and sort of stores the information in our subconscious, which basically becomes our character, our soul, our self, whatever you would want to call it, a subconscious mind. And so then when the new information is actually coming in, it basically goes back and stores it, and that there's a whole process that is happening. When the new information goes back, it gets scanned in our subconscious. A lot of associations related, which are already stored in our subconscious, get activated, and basis whatever is stored, and the new information, the integration happens, and a new block in that whole space gets formed, and the another story gets built in our subconscious. So if that subconscious, or the automated brain mode is not really worked upon, then the resultant consequent emotion that is going to come out, the resultant consequent decision that is going to come out, is going to be, you know in your favor, not in your favor. Maybe chance will have it that, or luck will have it that it works in your favor. Maybe it won't have it. And that's what the whole process of clarity is. And there are, I would say, very easy techniques before I really get into the whole base of it, to at least have some thinking models, some mental models in our mind, which at least gets us into a reflective stage of thinking.
Yeah.
And I
So
can talk about that as
yeah.
well.
So what are some of those? First maybe you can talk about, like you already mentioned, reflective is more that you look at the data and then you analyze and then only come to a decision, right? So which logically, if you think about it, makes sense.
Yeah.
That's how ideally you should be
Yeah.
making judgment or
Yeah.
decisions,
Yeah.
where you are looking at the different parameters and then
Yeah. But
making.
the reality, which I just proved, is that,
Mm.
I gave you a pig
Mm.
and you drew an animal version of a mouse,
Yeah.
So it is so easy to really go back into our automated brain mode.
Yeah.
The example that I gave earlier of the spectacle company,
Yeah.
can we really think out of the box
Mm.
and, go to a decision where, you can think
Yeah.
differently?
Mm.
Another, because I
Yeah.
have like a, since you just like touched upon, I just wanted to sort of give you an example of Henry Ford.
Mm.
When he would, and I'm talking about the hiring decisions that he made. Henry Ford was, just for the listeners who are listening to this, Henry Ford, of course, people know, but like was one of the pioneers of the whole auto manufacturing industry. Was he started Ford Motors and all, and he is known to be a great thinker. You know, so what happened? When he sort of grew the company to a certain level, when he was hiring people at a very senior level, he would not hire the people. Take the interviews at his office. What he would do was he would go to a nearby restaurant. And he would order soup and have a normal conversation with the person, just having like a general chit chat. And when the soup would come, he would actually wait and see what the other person is doing. If the other person actually puts salt and pepper in the soup without even tasting the soup, he would reject the person. So what I'm trying to say is that this is what the automated brain mode system is. We're moving ahead in such assumptive way. Our brain, just thinks that okay, soup is here or a pizza is here, put an oregano,
Yeah.
put a chili flake. The soup is here, put the salt. But that's what we think that we are being reflective in our process. But the reality is that 99% of the time we are not. And there is no other way out also. That's how the human mind functions. You have to understand that you cannot get rid of the automated brain. So the ideology is, or the ideal way of really, once you become aware of all the biases or the assumptions or the way of thinking that you have, the idea is to first really get into a reflective mode and then eventually change your automated mode in a way that it starts sort of throwing up the right things. So that's a process that takes effort. So yeah.
Got it. So you were talking about mental models
Yeah.
that one can use
Yeah.
to sort of develop reflective thinking.
Yeah.
Or reflective mode.
Yeah. So there are, I would say, first of all, we have to understand what mental models are. Mental models are nothing but your way of thinking.
Frameworks.
Yeah, you could call it framework, but even if I were to like really say it in even a simple laymanish way, your point of view, how would you would like think in a particular situation. These are thinking tools as such, and yes, guidelines or frameworks if you want to like sort of go into the technicality. So and this is not the ultimate solution, because our ultimate aim really is to change the automated function. But this definitely is the start process. These are your ammunitions that you have to really go through a checklist, so that at least you're in a reflective mode and you know what to exactly reflect on also. So the first mental model, which I would say, which is the mother of all models, is really the scientific way of thinking. Yeah. And I have it's taken a while for me to sort of get into this, and now it's like an automated function that happens because I've worked enough on my mind to start thinking in a reflective way, and now this has become my instincts. But to begin with, we should start analyzing everything in a very scientific way. Now, what does this really mean? And I'll give you an example also for this. Scientific way of thinking is that maybe you observe something. You have a question. You then once you observe, then you have a question. Once you have a question, you would go ahead and do some research. Then you would go ahead and make a hypothesis. Then you would make a prediction. Then you would go ahead and sort of test that prediction with reality. You will analyze the result. You would then, after you've analyzed the result, go back and form a theory or form a conclusion or theorize it or generalize it, So that's really what the whole scientific methodology is, that reality should never be taken for granted. Whatever you have in your mind, whatever you are sort of getting from the world, you first of all understand that there are just like a million forces in your mind that is working. Can you have a way to test it with reality out there? For example, and a very simple example, if I were to take, there is this big notion that getting up in the morning is good for health, you know right? A very simple thing. Can you be actually scientific about this? Can you really live in a more mindful manner to understand whether this is true for you or not?
For
So
you is the
yeah,
key.
for you is the key. Does it work for you,
Hmm.
in the reality that is there in this world? For example, I have this, I read about this thing, or I look at a influencer talking on Instagram saying that
Yeah.
getting up in the morning is great. So this is a notion, that assumption
Yeah.
that people have.
Hmm.
So I would go ahead and do some research, and I will do a chat GPT research. Is getting up in the morning good? Chat GPT will tell us that yes, getting up in the morning is great. I will do Google research, and I've done my all research, and doctors are also saying, everyone's saying that getting up in the morning makes sense. I would go ahead and then hypothesize and make a prediction that if I get up at 5 a.m. in the morning, this will result in a good mood and good health. That's the assumption and the hypothesis that I have, and that's the prediction that I've made. Then what I will do is I will go ahead and test it out in reality. And I'm giving you a very, very laymanish, simple example, okay, here, that how you can be really scientific in your approach of thinking. I will set up a time period of 30 days, and I will say that yes, let's assume that maybe 30 days is good enough time period or not, but at least let's test it out for 30 days whether this is good for me or not. I will set up an alarm for 5 a.m. I will get up in the morning at 5 a.m. for 30 days, and I will note down how I feel emotionally at 6 a.m. And I will make a note of it. So maybe at for the first 10 days I feel horrible. It's like something that I really don't want to do in my life. But after 20 days or maybe 30 days, I start feeling good about it. And that's the reality test that I have done. And then I will be able to conclude that whether getting up in the morning at 5 a.m. leads to good mood and good health for me or not is the question. That's how you sort of become independent in your thinking. And also at the same time, you're testing it out in reality. You're not just holding a notion in your mind, a belief in your mind. You have a methodology to first research.
Research.
You do the hypothesis,
Yeah.
then you go ahead and you make a prediction, then you
Prediction.
go ahead and test it out in reality, then you analyze the results, and then you go back and
Decide whether you want
decide, conclude
if it works for you or not.
conclude, whether it works for you or not. And this is just like a simple example. You can sort of go take this to any stage of decision making, whatever you have in mind, and you will be able to use the scientific methodology, and which should be used so that you're not just living in your beliefs, you're going out there and testing things out in reality. Now, another way of actually, another mental model is where you actually understand you maximize the return on failure. What I mean by this is that there are two variables that really are getting tested. That the insights and the learnings that you're actually getting from the failures in the shortest time span that you can. That should be the endeavor. Can you actually go ahead, as I said, test out things in reality? Can you fail and take out the results from those failures in the shortest time span? And if you can, that's when you're actually really generating higher returns on failure than lower returns. So, how you can do about it is there are two ways. First is that you have to first of all reframe the whole idea of failure. We the way we are brought up, the way we specifically someone like me, I saw academic highs throughout. When I was always good in studies, I always excelled. I started playing the guitar very early, so I always got like the adulation. I hardly failed in my life as I was growing up. Then I became a chartered accountant, one promotion after the other and
Yeah.
all. So I did not really, sort of fail. But I started facing failure once I got ahead in my life,
Mm.
and new roles came up and I was not performing that well. Then I was learning, and my whole idea of failure was very, very negative. I really started thinking that how can I fail? I've
Yeah.
always been a good student. I've
Yeah.
always been something who I believed that my mind was good. But I did not realize that actually life is throwing very new challenges, and being a perfectionist
Yeah.
is really going to hamper me. So,
Mm.
can I really change, first of all, if I want to grow? Can I change my whole frame, reframe the whole thought of failure? Can I change that failure into experiment?
Mm.
Can I really change that, reframe that and say that, okay, this is an experiment for me to grow, to learn? Can I, let go of that whole perfectionism thing?
Mm.
Again, this is just a way of thinking. I'm reframing
Mm.
the reality. The reality is just that.
Mm.
But for example, if this is the podcast I'm doing for the first time,
Mhm.
and I could really be scared
Mm.
and say that, what am I, am I even going to be able to answer these questions or not?
Yeah.
Or can I really and not go ahead and take this step and say that, okay, I'm happy making reels
Mm.
and talking, not coming out, in front of the camera, not really taking live sessions. I could do that. Or I could really say that, okay, this is an experiment.
Mm.
This scientifically leads to better connect.
Ah.
It leads to, sort of better, fulfills my whole intent of why I'm doing what I'm doing
Yeah.
in a better way. And yes, there is this inhibition, but can I really change this whole thing of my ideology or my thought process towards failure and my emotional response towards failure and convert it into an experiment?
Mm.
So that's the first step when it comes to like really thinking about failure in this whole return of failure thing. So lots of people don't go out there and talk on stage,
Yeah.
because they are fearful. But really, the research says that the better you are in your communication skills, the better you put yourself out there, the more chances you will get in career growth.
Yep.
So can you treat this whole thing
Mm.
as an experiment? So that's one. And second, can you actually shorten the time span of learnings that you're going to extract from these
Your
failures?
failures.
So which means that, can you, if you get like speaking gigs, once in a month, can you actually
Try
do
and
it
get 4
more? Yeah,
in a
4
month.
in a
Mm.
month. Can you get 30 in a month?
Yeah.
Can you try out and do an Instagram live? Can you put yourself out there in front of your relatives and
Mm.
talk?
Mm.
So you are trying to extract
Mm.
learnings,
Mm.
by failing.
Mm.
And that leads to success as well,
Mm.
because it's
And
giving you
as
the whole.
yeah, and as you defined in the previous mental model, the metrics that you're going to look at is something the outcome. What is the outcome that you're looking at is something that you decide before you run the experiment, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you have to actually have, it's not that, can I go ahead and test whether if I'll jump from a cliff, I will survive or not. That's plain stupidity. You have to be rational in your thinking as well. So that's where decision making and understanding the mind and understanding critical thinking really comes into the picture. But now, once you've concluded that, okay, going ahead and talking in front of people and being in front of the camera or talking on stage is going to improve my personality, which eventually is going to improve my career growth and eventually is going to get me to the goal that I have always desired to. That's a set thing, and you've done enough test of reality, gone ahead and looked at people, done your analysis. Now there is something that is stopping you. Can you change your mindset in a way that it leads to a success? So, and the only way that you can do is that you change your outlook towards failure. So that's another way of thinking. The one thing that I call is rat. Which is like risk of testing the most riskiest assumption, riskiest assumption test. That's what I sort of kind of name it. Which means that, say, for example, again, in a very realistic way, you going ahead with, you sort of decide to marry a person,
Mm.
and you also love your family. Now the riskiest assumption in this whole scenario is that, will that person actually gel with your family? That's the riskiest of the all. As per your value hierarchy structure. It could be different for someone else, I'm just giving you a hypothetical example. Now, can you, before you emotionally get involved in that person, with that person, can you actually test that in some way to minimize your learnings of that failure? Otherwise, you can go ahead and invest 2 years, do a live-in, then get your family to meet, be completely emotionally involved, and then maybe eventually figure out that, oh, this is not working. That's not the correct way of sort of moving ahead. This is like a personal example that I gave. There could be like an example where
What can you
I,
do?
I say that, okay, I have assumed that this will work. Now, the riskiest assumption in this whole business scenario is that maybe a competition will come up and do this better. So, can you first of all test that immediately? That would be the riskiest of the assumptions before testing out all the other things. You can, pick up that. This is how you sort of reduce your time span and get the maximum learning out of the
I think
failure.
this is really powerful.
Yeah. So again, this is like just a way of thinking. Another mental model that you can actually build in your arsenal that can test reality quickly. So that's one of the ways of thinking. Another mental model which I really love, in fact, and this is something that Charlie Munger, who's the who works very closely with Warren Buffett, their partners, he's come up with, and I actually adore this inversion model. And this is such a simple way of thinking.
What it's called? Inversion
It's
model.
called inversion. Where the traditional way is that you go ahead and seek success, right? But actually, the inversion model says that how can you avoid being stupid? Like, say, for example, can you avoid being stupid consistently, and that definitely will lead to success. So if you want to improve a relationship, you have to reframe your mind and thinking in a way and ask this question: what can I do to completely screw up this relationship?
Yeah.
And then avoid that.
Yeah.
If you want to improve your business, what can I do to completely screw up this business? Avoid that. So again, a very, very simplistic approach of another thinking tool. But this is the whole idea really, is to move from an automated thinking to a reflective thinking. And these are tools of reflection. How can you be closest to reality, and not really live in your emotions and in your beliefs? That's the whole idea. Is this the ultimate solution? No, and I'm going to come to that also. But these are definitely tools that we have which can help us in sort of moving ahead towards reality. Another way, if there is time,
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
I can
loving
really,
it.
really,
Yeah.
talk about that. The other, and now since we are now, I call it the hamburger happiness model. And this could actually be like a very, very strong model of taking your life's decisions. And it's all about getting the tools, the ammunition to make the right decisions. That's what this whole podcast, I'm assuming, and this whole session is all about. So, there could be only 4 types of burgers. One is that the burger sucks in taste and is unhealthy. Like, that is the stupidest way of taking decisions. If, you're taking a decision, and burger is just an analogy here, which is like, it doesn't taste good also, and it is not healthy also, then please avoid that. That's like the bottom-most burger that you should ever pick. And lots of, if I were to really give you an example, lots of rituals, let's not take a current ritual and not really, maybe people are deriving a lot of value out of that. Say one ritual, and maybe this would be a sensitive topic, but one ritual was sati once upon a time.
Yeah.
That was like a ritual that should not have existed at all.
Wow.
That's like you're taking the life of an independent mind, and you're depriving, maybe if they had children, you're depriving of the children of both the parents.
Yeah.
The person has died, the father has died, and now you're saying that the mother also should just go ahead and die. That's I'm giving you a very, very an obvious situation. But we if you were to really analyze, we really take a lot of decisions in our mind. A very simplistic decision is remaining in a toxic relationship. That is a yucky burger, and it is unhealthy as well. But we still continue to actually,
Or the job that you hate.
or the job that we hate. No, but the job may be giving us some values, and I'm going to come to that. Maybe it's giving us the financial security. So maybe it's a burger that is not healthy, but at least not tasty, but at least it's healthy. So I want to, I am not a believer of go ahead and follow your passion, because context really are something that we have to really understand. Passing, there are lots of people, great influencers, I follow also, but they'll come and they have such huge fan followings, and they'll say mutual funds is the way to really invest. But can you really pass this context, can have this in a generalized way? The context is so different for so many people. So that's when you start understanding the mind and understanding how to really extract things and figuring out what thinking is. That's when you understand how your context really works. And that's the ultimate way of really reflective thinking and decision making. But to come to the burger analogy, the second burger which we touched upon is that the burger is not tasty,
Tasty but healthy.
but it is healthy. And the rat race that people really get into, it is at least giving us some benefits. The third burger that we have in our life is actually that the it is tasty,
but not healthy.
but not healthy. uh, uh, Lots of people drink, lots of people smoke. Of course, they derive a lot of pleasure out of that. That's good, at least. It's very pleasure seeking thing. But eventually, I mean, if we were, at least it doesn't work for me. I don't want to generalize this, but it's like a decent example to really share. If you do anything in an excess, if you smoke in excess, there would be exceptions who people who would have lived at 90 as chain smokers. But do you want to really sort of analyze your life based on such exceptions, or do you want to be very scientific in your research? And research says that if you're continuously smoking, if you're a chain smoker, you're not really going to survive long. There are possibilities of really going bad. So that's a burger that is tasty, but absolutely not healthy. And that's like being in a pleasure seeking in the moment zone. But the best burger is actually which is tasty and healthy. That is when, that's if you can, and that's based on the fact that how can you all enjoy the now as well as enjoy something which is going to come in the future. For example, very simple example is exercising, meditating every day. It works for me. I'm talking about myself here. It gives me in this moment, my day, I know, okay, I get like a complete sense at how I would want to plan my day ahead. It brings me down into a reflective mode of stage. It helps me regulate my emotions. It tells me, working out makes me feel fitter, and eventually it has a compounding effect. So it's a burger that is healthy and is tasty for me. So if you're confused about making a decision, then you should understand that life is not short. Passion is not everything. Life, you have to do a lot of things which are as per needs also. It is not just interest. But if you're going to completely ignore your interest, you are then going to go into that into that zone where which is a healthy burger but not a tasty burger. So how can you really have a mix of it? And then the third layer of interest and needs I'm talking about, and you have to really understand what needs are. There are one need is like power, fame, money, but those are like the extrinsic motivations that you have. The true motivations are actually the psychological basic needs of autonomy, of competence, of relatedness. These are the ones that actually, and that's a whole new subject that I can really get into, which I would not want to get into too much detail. But if you understand that these are the basic psychological needs that every human being needs, and it's research based needs, if you understand your own value hierarchy structure, then you match it with your interest as well, and then you have like a third circle, which is your belief structure. For example, if I may be very interested in playing the guitar. I may be very, I would be very successful, and it could help me sort of fulfill all my needs as well. But my belief structure is that I'm a chartered accountant, that I should be sort of, working in a corporate, though I'm interested in that, but, how can I sort of leave this? That's like that's like the zone that I would want to be. What will other people? I'm working in a belief structure, right? So if that is also not aligned, that will also not lead to happiness. So how can you sort of reach to a stage?
So you're saying that happiness is the
Intersection of interest, needs, and beliefs. And how do you really understand this? Once you understand what interests are, first of all conceptually, then you apply it to your and really lay down that this, I know that this is my interest is, and this can actually convert into deep passion. Then you understand what my needs are, and you really understand what psychological needs really mean, the autonomy, competence, and relatedness that I really talked about. Those are the psychological needs that every human being eventually is looking for. And then you break it down, and you understand the concepts and understand it how it applies to your context. And then you also understand how beliefs really work, your beliefs, then you are sort of moving towards a decision. And that's like a burger that you would really want to eat, eventually, because life is not short and life is long, so follow your passion is a bad advice, but not follow your passion completely also is a stupid advice. How can you really build
Find
the
a balance
mix?
of these three things. No, I think I love that. I think
That's
this
what
is,
it
yeah,
is.
I think this is a really, interesting, and I love this because you have looked at needs, you have looked at interest, and you have also looked at your own beliefs.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes we also forget to look at beliefs when we are trying to make such decisions.
Yeah.
And while belief plays such a huge role in how we are gonna,
Correct. And this, in
yeah,
fact, this leads me to another mental model,
yeah,
and
I'm
in
loving
fact,
this.
two mental models that
Yeah.
I would want to share. And there's just so much that I can share.
Yeah, just
But
just before you go to the other mental models, like for example, this hamburger test that you said, right? Like, do you, whenever you have a decision to make, do you take your decision and run through this test, like,
absolutely.
and then say like, okay, let me list down what are the pros of this, what are the essentially the testy
Yeah.
things about this,
Yeah.
and also list down what are the healthy or unhealthy thing about this. Just make a list of this and see which burger is it,
Yeah.
or where this
Yeah.
particular things falls in, and then you,
Yeah. See, this sounds very simple, no? When I say this.
yeah,
But the reality is that we don't do this exercise.
yeah,
And when I'm saying that, when that we're working in an automated zone and a reflected brain modes, there are two brain modes. If we are not doing that, then how are we reflecting? What is your process of introspection? Do we even understand what introspection really means? That's these are the tools of introspection. This is the tool that how you can actually say that, okay, I am not going to look at the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm not going to look at the obvious thing of like creating a different colored spectacle. I'm going to look at how, what are the pros and cons. I'm going to step back, zoom out, be the doctor and not just the patient in my mind, and then come up with a solution. And these are tools of being reflective in your mind, so this sounds simple, but I can bet you, people at the highest level. I've been a CFO, and I've worked with investors, and I've raised like millions of dollars. I know how investor decisions are made. I know how due diligences are really concluded. So there's a lot of instinctive gut feeling that we really work on, emotions that we really work on, and that's the whole work. Can we regulate our emotions? Understand how the mind functions, understand the identity of the mind, and then eventually do the work of changing our belief structure with a proper methodology, to eventually then come up with instincts and emotions that work for us. That's the whole journey. And these mental models are just the beginning, you know of getting deeper. And this takes me to the next
yeah,
mental model.
two mental models you were talking about, yeah.
So the other one that I really love, actually, I call it the double loop thinking, which goes one step beyond scientific thinking. Scientific thinking is that you sort of have a question, you do an assumption, you test it out, and then you maybe go back. You generalize. You go back to your, you keep revolving around this test only. But the double loop thinking is that can maybe you missing out something. We are right now moving around that anchor only. Can I go back, reflect, and first of all think that is the anchor that I've set, is that correct also or not? And I've given enough examples of that. So it's basically delving deeper into the belief structure. Is the problem,
So essentially questioning,
yeah,
yeah,
is
what you
the
believe in.
is the problem, and how did those beliefs really come? Why do I think the way I think? why am I thinking in this direction? Have I questioned that? So say for example, if I say that, okay, I feel a negative emotion by not spending enough time with my parents. Okay, so I would go ahead and say that, what, first of all, figure out what that negative emotion is. Is that sadness? Is that guilt? Is that anxiety? What is it? Do I understand what sadness is? Do I understand what anxiety is? Do I understand? Have I? We really think that negative emotion is just like a plethora, one thing, but there's just a million things that actually make negative emotions. So we have to go to that level, and so I figure out that, okay, there's guilt. This guilt, how is this guilt coming from? This guilt is coming from one of the notions that I hold in my belief structure, that I should be spending time with my parents. Where did that belief come from? How did it become a part of my subconscious? Why do I think that I should be spending more quantity time instead of quality time? So structure that. Maybe you are correct in that guilt, maybe you're not, but at least you're giving yourself that you have
You
that
went
arsenal, that
deeper.
you're going deep down and questioning that,
I
which
love
is
it.
double loop thinking. So we really work on a surface level, and that's when, once you understand the science of emotions,
Yeah.
and I'll touch upon that as well, if time permits. But that's when you start really changing your life.
Hmm.
And the next, mental model, which I really think is the key that everyone should follow, and briefly I've touched upon that, is really first principles thinking. How can you really simplify things? If you Richard Feynman, who's like one of the famous physicists
Yeah.
of his time, the way he thinks is different. And Richard Feynman really said that if you have a problem, can you go ahead and explain it to a child?
Child. Yeah.
If you can actually explain it to a child, then you have understood it. You have broken down the peels and the layers of everything, and you know that this is what the essential fundamental crux of that situation is. This is why I understand why I feel guilt. This is why I understand why my business should not work, or should work. So that's first principles thinking. For example, if if people understand in examples, we kind of understand that how the plane flies. But if we were to sort of bring it down to the level that is so basic, like if we would put our hand out in front of a moving car, which is like moving car, we put our hand in out of the window, and we will see that our hand is not falling down. If the car is running at a particular speed, so we know that, okay, there are few forces that are working. There are this speed of the car that is like pulling the, moving the hand forward. Then there is this speed, force underneath the hand, which is sort of keeping us up. That thrust is sort of not making the hand go down because of gravity. And then there is speed, and there's force in front of this thing. So if you I'm just trying to give you an example, that if you like really break down the things at that perceptual level of thinking and make it so simple, you will really then be able to understand high level of thinking. And for that, my friend, we have to understand what thinking really is. You have to understand. We think that, okay, imagination, there's just so much that goes on in our mind, that imagination is thinking, or the emotions that we feel is thinking, or the memory that we have with remembering something, that's thinking. But that's really not thinking. you know and I talk really deep into my in my course, called the logic of thinking. But thinking is when you're actually, understanding the cause and effect. Once you have the arsenal to understand that these are the similar things in this is the once you can take out the similarities, the differences between things, once you can actually reach to the core of what the issue is, to reach to the essential items, and then you can integrate it with a lot of other things and eventually make a conclusion and a hypothesis, or a a generalization. That's what thinking is. And how do we really do this in any situation? That's the work. Once we start doing this work, that's when we start changing our belief structure. That's when we start changing our emotions as well. So it's all scientific, really. You have to do the hard work. Mindful training, can only get you this much. But if you really want to make a difference in your life, you have to understand that there is just one identity of the mind. This is how the mind functions. This is a universal identity, and there is no other way and no escape route out. If you want to solve things from the core, then you have to do the work and really dig deep.
Wow, that's a lot
Yeah.
of information, Ashish, and I'm sure somebody who's listening to this is like, wow, that's like hell lot of information on my mind, how I can think about the mental models and everything that you've shared. So let's talk about one last thing, which is the science of emotion you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you think there's a science to our emotions as
Yeah,
well?
of course,
Okay.
there is. So how we really perceive emotion is that we see something
Mm-hmm.
and then we feel.
Mm.
So we're perceiving something. We see like our boss, and there's immediate feeling that is happening. We see a good movie. We see a great actor performing, and there is immediate feeling.
Mm.
We see a great piece of art. Hear a great piece of art or music, and a feeling gets generated. So that feeling
Mm.
really is emotion.
Mm.
But there is, and everything is happening in a millisecond. We are not really, we don't have time to really generate emotions. Emotions get generated automatically, but your emotions actually is a result of all the character, the subconscious, the structure that you've actually built in yourself. That's reflecting what in a form of feeling. So there is a lot of evaluation that is happening between perception and feeling.
Mm.
And what is that evaluation? Which I mentioned. There is this new information that is coming in. It is getting scanned in your subconscious. All the associated feelings, things, thoughts are getting highlighted and becoming available for you. Like if you watch a horror movie, everything gets getting highlighted. If you are spending time with your spouse, who you really love, everything is really getting, sort of reflected, coming to you to the surface at that time. Everything is happening in fraction of a second, less than a second also, and and it is resulting in a form of thinking. So that's, if we really understand first of all that this is what is happening, that is when we give ourselves the access
Mm.
to really go ahead and change it. If we think that emotion is also thinking,
Mm.
then we can never change it.
Mm.
Emotion is the result
Mm.
really of our
Of
thinking.
our thinking. Mm.
It is not thinking. So if you're feeling sad, you're not thinking and feeling sad.
And
It's something that you've stored in your mind because of the way you've been thinking or not thinking, so to say, and classified something in your mind and subconscious in a particular folder, which is termed as sadness. And a new information is coming, it's interacting with that, and it is changing
yeah.
that. So if you can, if you get the science of really classifying things in your mind and putting it into the right folders,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you start solving things. So if you have say for example, if you have a desktop
Mm.
and all the files are just stored on the
Yeah.
desktop, you're
Yeah.
going to go crazy, right?
Mm.
That's why there is a system of folders.
Mm.
That's why there's a methodology of classification.
Mm.
So our mind works like that.
Mm.
It subconsciously put things in folders.
Mm.
And if you've put the wrong file in the folder,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know how to really reach to the definition of that file, first of all, what is the essential characteristic of that file, and if you don't know that, and if you don't have the tools to really put it into the right folder, you will always be confused. So that's really the, in a very broad way, the science of emotions. But it will take another 3 or 4 podcasts to really get deeper into this whole basic science of emotions as well.
No, I can completely see that
Yeah.
it's gonna take. We can go on and on.
Yeah.
But Ashish, this has been such a great conversation, and the amount of, like was saying earlier, the amount of information and knowledge that you've shared on this topic. I think there's a lot for anybody who's checking this to chew upon,
I hope
and
so. That's the whole
then
endeavor.
yeah, and
That's
go
the,
down the rabbit hole. And for anybody who's looking at going deeper and understanding this, then jamwithashish.com.
yeah.
That's your website
That's
where
correct.
he has got 2 courses. You can check those out and go deeper into this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bijay. It was wonderful, and the work that you guys are doing, it's amazing. Thank you so much for having me here.
Awesome.